There's football, and then there's SEC football. Welcome back, everybody, to SEC Weekly, your one-stop shop every single week for all things SEC football. I'm your host, Matt DeRosiers, joined by two of the best in the business, Cody Carpentier and Alex Dunlap. Every single program is practicing. Spring ball is here, folks. It's time to start digging in for the weekly takeaway. So, Cody, what's something you've kind of gathered here in this past week?
Well, I think I think I'd be remiss not to start the show with a complete freak of nature that has joined the ranks of the SEC.
The South Carolina kid.
Well, yeah, don't spoil it, guys.
Okay. I was going to say, man, that I hope we could talk about this guy for sure because
6'7.5" 295 pounds from Germany, rugby player, insane feat. I mean, this guy's never played football a day in his life. Brandon Collier, a Germany-based Premier Prospects International guy that has continued to bring guys over the last couple of years. Brings Neff Giwa. So Neffgiwa is the name. 37-inch arms. The last 2 weeks, maybe three really, since Brandon posted this guy.
Wait, did you say 37-inch arms?
37-inch arms. So the last 3 weeks or so.
Tyree Wilson kind of wingspan on him for sure.
A maniac. He's 20 years old, and he signed on Sunday with South Carolina. He's had a lot of offers and opportunities come his way from Miami, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, SMU. Namely, it was Miami and South Carolina in the end all for the push. There was a report that came out over the weekend that South Carolina was trying to money whip him, and Shane Beamer, the coach of South Carolina, had to come out and he goes, I know there was a post on social media about how we didn't want to let him out of the building, and we were just throwing all this money around at him, and that wasn't true. So he says it's not true. But then he says, we were just trying to keep him from going somewhere else because he sat in my office and told me how much he loves this place and told me that for the first time he was here, how it felt like home. And he's like, well, shoot. I mean, you might as well come here. We want you to come. And I think he ended up taking a visit to Miami, and he saw Francis Mauigoa last week. Texas offered as well, was the belief. I don't know if that's official or not, but his top five before he announced was Miami, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and South Carolina. He ends up committed to South Carolina and Shane Beamer in the 2026 class. So he'll get on campus as soon as possible. He's 20 years old, like I said, so he's not like some kind of 17-year-old freshman. He's a 20-year-old freshman and never played a down of football before. But I will say the one thing that stood out to me is how And normally if I'm like an agent or a trainer, you always get that helium pump about my guy, right? My guy's going to be this. My guy's going to be that. But Brennan Collier is hitching his wagon so tightly to Neff Giwa. He said, this is a future first-round pick. This is a future first-round tackle is what he believes. And we're going to see what's going to happen with South Carolina. Obviously, we talked about their tackle injuries and stuff the last couple of weeks, but we'll see what happens with Neff Giwa. 6'7.5". 295, never played a down of football before in his life with 37-inch arms.
How does this guy know how to put out a top five? He doesn't even come from this culture and stuff. I guess his agent's just telling him, well, we have to do a top five. We gotta have what's his Hayes Fawcett make us a edit that we're gonna put up on X, all the rest of it. Man, I heard it was Bruce Feldman talking about it, and apparently whether South Carolina money whipped them or not, their offensive line coach at South Carolina, I believe it's Randy Clements.
Yep.
Apparently he felt really good with this guy because he coached. It was Sebastian Vollmer.
That's right.
Who was another guy that kind of, raw international type of player who he coached. Was that
Houston?
Was that University of Houston?
Yep.
So he was there from 03 to 07, I guess, and that apparently was a big part of the pitch. So yeah, man, that'll be interesting to see. That Feldman's all over this because he's trying to get eyes on guys for the upcoming freaks list, and I'm sure we're gonna get.
He's guaranteed to be in that top 100.
Did you mention his like they mentioned a 40 time. Did you talk about his 40 time?
I didn't. I saw it come in at like 4.81. I want to believe it
That's
was,
what you right. They say he can run a 4.8, 4.81. I
which
thought I
is
saw
maniacal.
4.88. Either way, 6'7", 280.
So we're talking like
4.88.
2-3 years in the combine. We're going to see this guy probably around 315, 325,
Yeah.
probably, and he's going to be running like 4.9.
But he still has to play 3 years before he comes out, right?
That's a great question.
Because the American rule is removed from high school. It's not age dependent, right?
I'm
It's
not sure if
removed
there's
from high
any
school.
international intertwine in there because I know that obviously the NFL has done a lot of this international stuff. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah. No, it'll be he's never played football before. He got all these offers from a 4-second clip on.
It might be 3.5 years or it might be 3 years removed from high school.
Yeah,
And
it could be. Yeah. So
I'm not exactly 100% sure, but
we'll see.
he's a man child nonetheless. Kentucky Nugget I have here.
Is that his nickname, the Kentucky Nugget?
The Kentucky Nugget. Dino Nuggets got recalled at Walmart this week.
Ooh, okay. Uh-oh.
Lead poisoning. I don't go to Walmart.
Whoa.
Lead poisoning, I guess, is in the McNuggets at the Walmart.
Oh,
Kentucky Nugget.
Shoot.
Wildcat Nugget here. So they had some player availabilities this week, and a couple of cornerbacks were asked kind of about players they had to go against. And a couple of the cornerbacks brought up Shane Carr. They said the fans are going to love Shane Carr because he's very explosive. Said Kenny Minchey's very accurate. Kenny Minchey's a quarterback from Notre Dame that came over this year. Shane Carr was a transfer portal wide receiver that is from Bakersfield, California, by way of Southern Utah. He was the 152nd ranked transfer portal wide receiver this year. Overall, he was ranked 1,040 in the national On3 transfer portal rankings. But he was brought up by Grayton and Nichols, a couple of cornerbacks from Kentucky, as a guy that you got to keep an eye on him. He's very twitchy. And so 6'2", 290 pounds at the wide receiver position here for Kentucky. He's going to be a senior this year, like I said, out of Southern Utah. Just a quick nugget there of a player we need to keep an eye on because they added a ton. Obviously, getting a brand new coach by way of Oregon, brand new quarterback, brand new running back from Texas, a lot of new stuff. And Shane Carr is one of the first players to start popping their eye up at Kentucky.
What else you got?
That's it.
All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was but you had some LSU stuff.
I'll come back to LSU later.
All right. I just want to talk about this ESPN article. We could talk about some of you're mentioning newcomers via the transfer portal. It was an article on ESPN that I was reading that caught my eye. It was about college football, and the article name and the author here is scouting the top college football prospects and how they'll fit in 2026. So this is talking about all the freshmen, right? This is on ESPN.com by Craig Halbert and Tom Luganbill. And just some of the names that sort of stood out to me as guys who they think could have an impact this year. The first one that stood out to me that I thought was super interesting, Cody, was OU. They have Jake Cruel listed on here. Where we're talking about the OU Sooners and about how that front seven, and people talk about, they could have 3 first rounders and all the rest of it as far as on the defensive line. They're saying, they have Taylor Wine coming back, but they said, don't be shocked if Cruel plays a role opposite him. And to me, I'm just like, well, I've seen Jake Cruel live and I've seen him in camps, been around the guy. What I can say about him is he's a dog. He's an ultra competitor.
Yep.
He was at the Rivals 5-star in Indianapolis last summer. I remember him and Richard Wesley from Texas, who was also on this list. We'll talk about in a second. But these were the guys that all the viral clips were going out on X. One of which I might have put out, not to try and roast the kid, but where just putting Felix Ojo, who was like the $4 or $5 million offensive tackle that ended up going to Texas Tech, putting this guy on complete skates, and going up against some other good offensive linemen, like the right tackle there in those drills. What was that kid that was committed to Penn State? Cody's like Kevin
Brown.
Where did Kevin Brown end up?
West Virginia.
How did West Virginia get him?
Got that Pat McAfee money, son.
Did he?
Yep. He
Maybe
committed on McAfee show.
Maybe he's just kind of from that area.
Yeah, he's a PA kid. Yeah.
Gosh. That's a lot of big programs dropping the ball on that kid, Kevin Brown. It's hard to believe he ended up at West Virginia. But anyway, Jay Cruel shows up really well against these guys on one-on-ones. He's this kind of guy that wins a one-on-one and gets fired up and does a hoot and holler and then just does a standing backflip. You know the kind of player, right? Just super, super athletic, twitchy, good, but definitely, from what I could tell, definitely undersized, right? Do you think that Jay Cruel can come in and make an immediate impact?
I do not think he will, unless injuries happen. So you brought up the opposite side of Taylor Wine. There's an injury right now who's unavailable, and that is I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to get the last name right. Adepuju Adebore. He's the starting right side DN right now, but Danny Okoye has been getting a lot of rave reviews through practice this spring right now, and he's one that they're looking at to kind of move forward and take a bigger step forward, especially with Adebore out. Okoye is the one expected to step up. He's been getting TFLs left and right in practice, and he's the one that everyone's pointing to as, like, who's next, I guess would say be the thing after Taylor Wine. So again, we've both seen Jake Cruel in person. He's got the motor, he's got the gas to do it, but on an every down perspective, or even like 25-30% as a true freshman, I'm not quite there on Jake Cruel quite yet. He's got some density to build in that lower half.
How about this one that I thought was super interesting? And another guy that I think you might have seen at a camp or two. Have you seen Jeraylin McCoy?
I have not seen Jeraylin McCoy.
Have you studied him at all?
I have studied him.
Okay, so with Jeraylin McCoy, if you just so this is a defensive lineman, kind of defensive tackle type. They
expected him to play it. He's at Florida, right?
Yeah, Did I not say that? So yeah, so he's at Florida, 6'6". They're saying he's an 80-inch wingspan. They say in the article he's got consistently posting strong testing numbers, changes direction well, and practices smart. I always saw him when I looked at him. I'm like, man, this guy is a like from a physical standpoint, looks like a Keldrick Falk-ish type kind of starter kit. But I always thought maybe he'd end up moving inside. I kind of saw him more as an eventual defensive tackle. It looks like they're going to be trying to use him in a couple of different ways. The thing about him was, I just heard whispers on the recruiting circuit that maybe there were some things with his level of motivation, just stuff like that concerned a few teams as far as his one SEC scouting director told me that he needs to get his head on straight. So some stuff like that. But certainly if that's something where it's like he's out there practicing hard, practicing smart. Now this article is not necessarily coming from spring football, but if ESPN has identified McCoy as a player who could make an early impact, I find that super interesting just based on all the measurables that he brings to that position.
I think he's more developmental of a 4 or 5 star type of a player than some of these other names like the LSU kids, like Jake Cruel's physically a developmental player. I think technically Jeraylin McCoy is more of a developmental player. Whereas I think you put like a Richard Wesley from Texas, I put a Richard Anderson from LSU, a Deuce Geralds from LSU, both, as far as defensive linemen overall, ahead of a Jeraylin McCoy. And I also look at like the Florida defense where, they've brought in guys in the transfer portal all along the defensive line, and they have one of the better standouts as a freshman last year in Jaden Woods on the defensive line. So Joseph Mbachu, also a freshman last year that I remember Texas and Florida were in a fight over up until the finish line. He was a big one that, like, he's been banged up this spring. I think Cameron James is a senior on the other side there. Like the avenue or the street to get to some starting snaps. I think it's going to be tougher for Jarrell McCoy. So, like you said, his head's going to have to be completely locked on tight to really get through this gauntlet. And with Summerall there, I don't think it's going to be some kind of, hey, he's a 5-star and he looks decent. Let's
No, he doesn't care.
That ain't going to happen.
Yeah, he doesn't care. Richie Wesley at Texas was another guy who they mentioned. Richie Wesley, who famously committed with Dan Lanning in Oregon, where Dan Lanning shamefully jumped in a swimming pool with him, and that ended up
Big Ten stuff.
It ended up decommitting, committing to the Texas Longhorns, sticking with that commitment. He was a reclassified from the 2027 class to the 2026 class, so he's still very, very young, but comes into Texas. He is already at this point, from our sourcing around the Longhorns, working in with the ones, but a staple with the twos as a true freshman. I think that Richie Wesley's one that's on this list who we actually will see, right? You mentioned the LSU guys, and those guys were right at the top of the list. Lamar Brown, Deuce Geralds, Richard Anderson. Are these guys that you're going to touch on your little LSU rundown here in a minute? Or like,
well, I can just say this. I talked about Deuce Geralds and Richard Anderson last week or the week before about how they were out there with the ones as a duo on that.
Oh, and then Lamar Brown's not even there.
Lamar Brown's not even there. He was actually he popped up at practice this week one day.
He's like the top player in the nation, right?
He's got the hair that's like 3 feet tall. He's expected to get there and enroll this summer. So they don't even got the number one player in America on the team yet, and they already got Deuce Geralds and Richard Anderson kind of running with the ones in the defensive tackle group. So this is going to be a maniacal trio that they were able to keep when Lane Kiffin got there.
A couple of offensive linemen that stood out to me, like John Turntine Jr. at Texas is always going to stand out to me, talking about him being a contributor. I'll just say that I don't think that he's going to contribute at Texas as a true freshman, but I think he's a guy that you should look out for in 2027. He comes into Texas at 285 pounds, which is better than almost higher than I expected, because Cody, you can speak to this. Turntine, incredibly strong as an ox, great feet, technical, great punch. He's playing right now as the second team right tackle in practices for the Longhorns. And I think that's where he sticks. But the issue with him has just been his size and his weight. And Cody, I believe that at a certain point, we were kind of maniacally going into some of your weightlifting databases and looking into some of these, what do you call them? Your weight room meets, like your powerlifting meets. And he was down. What was he down there for a while?
So he officially, these are official weights, because at these powerlifting meets, you have to officially weigh in before you can lift weights. February 2024, he was 311 pounds. February 2025, he got down to 268.
Yeah, it's just a wild roller coaster.
Strength went up. His strength went up considerably across the board, but his body weight dropped by over 40 pounds.
I think that Texas just thinks that they need to get John Turntine's body right, but I think he's going to start next year. I think this year, if he's going to be a factor, it'll be
kind of on that Brandon Baker kind of.
Like Brandon Baker was as a freshman, and coming into last year, just came into his sophomore season as the outright starter there at right tackle. The other offensive lineman that caught my eye, and this catches my eye because of it, at South Carolina, we talked about Neff earlier, who's going to be playing offensive tackle. They have Jacarius Peak, who was the big transfer that they brought in, but he's injured. He should be good to go for the summer and for fall camp, they're saying.
Expected. He's the one that's expected back for fall camp. Josiah Thompson's the one that they feel like they lost for the whole year.
Right. So they're talking about Darius Gray, and I don't know much about Darius Gray. Can you tell us about him?
Darius Gray's nice. Darius Gray was the consensus number one interior offensive lineman in the class this last year, who was kind of you could say he was the crown jewel of the South Carolina class. They brought in a quarterback and Landon Duckworth as well as a couple of defensive linemen. But Darius Gray, 6'2.5", 285 pounds, out of Richmond, Virginia. This guy was down there at the Navy All-American Bowl we went to back in January. This is the highest rated offensive line commit in South Carolina history. in this class. So across the board, I think he was consensus. I want to say he was a 5-star for 247, top 15 player in America, and then he was a 4-star for Rivals and ESPN. But yeah, the expectation, you brought him up. He's on this list for a reason. I think the expectation is he's going to compete for this left guard spot from the jump. They brought some portal guys in to compete for center, right guard, like you said, right tackle, but he's going to be heavily in this conversation for left guard and right guard.
Do you think he can start?
I'm not sure what the weight was he came, because he was listed as, I want to say 285 or 290. I wonder what his South Carolina 280. His South Carolina weight is officially 285. I think we're still a little ways out. That's probably not going to come to head until mid-August, if I had to guess. I think he's got the talent to do it. I just don't know if he's physically going to be there yet.
It says he's going to enroll in the summer. Is that too quick for a freshman to hop in the offensive line, get reps with the ones you can get in the summertime? That's all right.
It just depends on how good you are.
And if you're a super 5-star, we saw it one time with Kelvin Banks show up in June and start for the University of Texas at left tackle.
They just say, like, all right, Kelvin's in town, stick him at left tackle. You know what I mean?
Over the blind side, baby.
Yeah.
And if you're South Carolina,
welcome to campus.
They've been struggling with offensive line. And this is I think a lot of the outside looking in, people view this as like Shane Beamer's job.
Beamer's got to win. I don't think it's outside looking in. I think it's from right under his dang seat, dude. That thing's hot.
I don't think it. I mean, it doesn't feel as hot in the state as it does from the outside looking in. I'll just say that. Like, as someone who lives here and as someone who, that guy's around, and it doesn't feel like his seat's that hot. It feels like it's hot. It just doesn't feel like it's. I don't know who you'd say for a comparison, but I don't
in this climate, I mean, the all you need is a mildly hot seat, and it seems like that thing can.
He just had one of the best recruiting classes this program's ever seen.
But isn't that an extra indictment on his ability if he can't win? Now he's got the seasoned quarterback. He's got the weapons.
I like Beamer. I think Beamer.
I was saying he made a lot of aggressive moves from the coaching perspective. He was able to keep Lenore Sellers, keep Dylan Stewart, keep Nick Harbour, go out aggressive, be aggressive in the transfer portal in the offensive line and defensive backfield, and then have one of the best, if not the best, recruiting class of all time. Like, I get it. How you look at it, you could say, this is it. This is your year. Win 9 games or you're done. But I think if he wins 8 or wins, I think 7 would be like 7, then you're like, all right, you can see the fire coming out of your mouth. But I think if you're in that 8 category, which I think is very attainable with a quarterback like Lenore Snellers and the talent that they have, I think it's attainable. And at that point, I think at 8-4.
What is their win total? Does anybody know? It's probably got to be 5.5.
I think, is it 6.5 or 5.5?
I thought it was 6.5.
What if it's 6.5? It's still. I mean, it's like 8 would be overachieving. 7 would, if it's 6.5, then 7 would be over.
5.5.
5.5.
FanDuel is 5.5.
And is Juice on the over or the under?
I couldn't tell you that.
So that isn't how they do lines in South Carolina.
I'm saying I'm not on that page.
Oh, okay.
Some websites I can't see, depending on the state you're in, you can't see yeah.
Okay. Well, fair enough. All right. So there's the Shane Beamer thoughts about these running backs. Cody, Maddie, any of them pop off to you? They mentioned possible guys that could be contributors this next year. Xavier Crowell, who ended up going to Bama. Derek Cooper, who came to Texas, but he has Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown ahead of him. But Derek Cooper, man, all through spring, you keep on hearing about him. KJ Edwards, who ended up going to Texas A&M, and I guess he'll have Reuben Owens to deal with, but Reuben Owens has had trouble staying healthy. I'm still a Reuben Owens believer myself. And then the other one I thought was interesting, Jonathan Hatton at OU. And if you've watched some of I believe I've seen Hatton during some of these spring practice workouts for OU. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the one back there that looks like the big beast, where I'm like, oh gosh, they've added some size at the running back position here.
Another thing with that, though, is that Xavier Robinson's been banged up, who's expected to be their starting running back at Oklahoma. So he might be the one with the clearest path Then I would probably go with you on the KJ Edwards side of that conversation. Like you said, the problem with Derek Cooper inherently is that there's super talents in front of him from an NFL draft perspective. I think the Xavier Crowell one's very interesting. In-state kid who stayed at Alabama,
reclassified for this year.
Yeah, you reclassified for this year, and the group in front of him isn't really that elite. Like we've seen enough out of AK Deer to believe that there's something there. Daniel Hill came out last week and said he squatted 805 pounds, and was just like, "Yeah, they put the weight on the bar, and I did it." And that was his press availability, and they just did that. I think he's like 200 and correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's like 200. Is he 240 pounds?
But, man, are these all guys who couldn't play ahead of Jam Miller?
236 pounds, correct.
Yeah, that's right.
So what does that? So what does that mean?
Well, it means there's a possibility for Crowell to climb up this depth chart, and he does fit. I mean,
because I think
when you squint, he looks like a Bama back. He's big kid. He's over 210 pounds. So I mean, he's got the frame, and like I said, he's pretty mature for his age because he reclassified. You know, so he's going to be young, ultra. You know, that kind of speaks to maybe where his head's at. So the depth chart can't be. It's not this huge mountain for him to climb. There's an opportunity for him to continue to climb up.
Out of that whole group, I think I'm most excited about Xavier Crowell. I think he walks into the building in Alabama and he's better than Jam Miller.
What about you, Maddie? Who's your one guy?
My one guy from this running, like we're talking about the running back room in Alabama.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with Alex. I mean, you're always intrigued by the size and a guy who can bet, throw around almost a ton of weight, like a literal
size, man. It's
weight.
like he's a slasher. So it's the shed ability through
for sure. And I think the point that you made, Alex, is kind of where I stand. If these guys weren't able to push Jam Miller out of the way, they weren't really clamoring to use him. And this is the team that was so thirsty for a running game. Just like Oklahoma. We talked about this in a previous episode, how much Oklahoma needed a running game that they couldn't find. Bama was the same way. They lost big games because they couldn't run the ball. And it's like you have all these guys in the running back room. You have them on the practice field. You know what they are. And you never once called on these guys to see what they had, see what the juice was like. That for me is just enough for me to see a guy with Crowell's ability where he is, coming at the top 30 player in the top on the list here. And he's got the size. Again, reclassifying speaks to his maturity, in my opinion. So I think this is an opportunity for a kid for, killing the board to say, I know what I have on my running back room. Give me something I don't know. Let's see what the kid has.
All right. And then two others just at the wide receiver spot. And one of them I thought was interesting, and I might have always been wrong about this. Sedarian Morgan at Alabama staying there. I didn't follow his recruitment closely. But Cody, did you have him ranked as a tight end or as a wide receiver?
Sedarian Morgan?
Yeah.
Wide receiver.
Doesn't he weigh like 220 pounds or something? Like, what does he weigh?
He's a massive human.
Yeah.
I know he's
like 210,
but I think he was listed like 220 coming out.
What is your okay, so all right, so here on the article it says, okay, they say he's 6'5", 208. So still massive. He looks really big catch radius guy. Just that doesn't really remind you of like
he honestly reminded me coming out of Cam Coleman.
You think he moves like Cam Coleman?
I didn't say he moves like him. I said he reminded me of
the frame.
The thing that reminds me about Cam Coleman is he's an alien in how he moves at that.
Correct,
size.
but he's also in his third year, and I'm just saying, Sedarian Morgan's a young kid right now. Like I think there's a little projection built in with that, but I think physically, like when I watched Sedarian Morgan, that's the player that I kind of was like, I think he can mold into that.
Okay, and then my final one I wanted to ask you about is Tristan Keys.
That's the guy. I'm glad you bring him up because he is when you close your eyes, you look at these Tennessee receivers, you think of tall guys that attack downfield. That's what I think he can do. I don't know if he has the high end speed of some of these wide receivers we've seen come out of Tennessee, like Chris Brazel last year and even a couple years ago.
But is it good to be like a Hyatt or a Dante?
Not in the NFL, but it is for Tennessee. It's a good thing for Tennessee because they continuously get production out of this archetype. And this guy, I mean, there is a higher ceiling than these prospects. This guy's, the number 10 kid on the top 300. So there's a lot of upside, and there's a wide open availability at this receiver position. They have 2 freshmen that might actually get a sniff on the field and make some help. But Tristan Keys is the one that fits the system, comes in with some prospect pedigree, and could get a chance to play and make some significant plays for the Volunteers early on in his freshman year, which is massive.
All right. Cody,
Can I say one thing? I just want to stay
do you
first.
Do you have anything on Keys though?
That's what I was going to say. I would tell you that I'm not quite. From a Tennessee opportunity perspective, I can get behind Keys. I think Keys is a very good talent. From the clips I've seen, I'm a little more reserved on the Keys conversation from some of the clips I've seen. Again, but that's a lot different. I think as far as a high school kid, that kid was the creme de la creme, the top of the food chain. But there's one other guy that's not on that list that has had a very good spring that I really wasn't going to mention in my LSU section, but he does go to LSU, and his name is Jabari Mack. Did you guys see this Jabari Mack catch this week?
The one-hander?
The one-hander from practice?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, yeah.
You didn't see this, Alex?
No, I didn't see it.
All right, let me for the video audience, I'm going to pop it up on the screen, and you can see this catch because this is a true freshman in practice, Jabari Mack.
Oh well, I mean, like it's just
plucked it.
I mean, it's a 1v1 rep, and it looked like a little kind of, I couldn't tell what the whole route was, but the back kind of pylon to word.
It's one of those things
that's the kind of thing where whenever it's plucked, it gets plucked like that, and you just say, well, there's like it looks like he's got those long ET alien fingers on him.
So that's a guy that's not on that list. That's Jabari Mack from Destrehan. Destrehan?
I don't,
Louisiana?
dude. If it's in Louisiana, they say it in some kind of cockamamie way that you'll never understand.
I'm from Massachusetts, brother. I don't know how to say any of these dang words from down south.
All right, but he's up there. He's definitely buried in that wide receiver room, though. Speaking of the wide receiver room, the report out of LSU about who the number 1 wide receiver is right now started to clear up a little bit this week of a report from the Bengal Tiger. The media's only been able to observe about 20 to 30 minutes of the first 4 practices this week, but in individual drills, watching wide receivers run through drills leaves the Bengal Tiger confident in the most presumed would be the case that Kansas State's Jace Brown, former Kansas State, Jace Brown is LSU's highest ranked transfer portal wide receiver, and he looks to be locking up the number 1 spot. So ahead of, that's kind of filling in for the Barry and Brown, the Xavier Thomas, that whole role from last year.
Was there a number 1 there last year? Aaron Anderson and Xavier and Berrien, and they have like 4 guys at the combo. Chris Hilton. They like.
That's the whole thing. Is that it was it was full of solid dudes, and then this year they brought in Eugene Wilson from Florida. They brought in Winston Watkins with Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss, Jabari Mack, who I brought up before. I think they brought in Trey Brown, was also a transfer portal guy. Like they brought a ton of receivers in, and it sounds like through 4 practices, Jace Brown has taken the step up. Speaking of portal, well, Sam Levitt gets wedged in here a little bit. So Sam Levitt, the quarterback from Arizona State, the update on him, still limited, starting to get extra reps as the weeks go by. He's still recovering from that Liz Frank injury, but he's not quite back. He's extremely competitive, so I know it bothers him that he can't do more, but it's a really good thing that he's continuing to grow, and it's been challenging for him is kind of the way they reported it. But he's still working towards getting out there for 7-on-7 and team reps. Within that, there was an article that came out this week on On3 about spend and the goal spend for LSU.
Unbelievable.
And the planned allocation of money on this roster was between $25 and $30 million in revenue sharing and NIL. And that number rose to at least $40 million this year. A LSU donor says that's Lane's infectious personality. He has a vision. He has a system. He has
the quote from Lane Kiffin was, "Why wait?" Right? Like
he has coaches that will run through a wall for him and a knack for recruiting. It escalated, and here we are. After watching Kiffin recruit, the donor said he's very much an introvert, but boy, oh boy, can he turn it on when players and parents walk in the door. For 5 to 10 minute bursts, he can sell LSU like no other.
for 5 to 10 minute bursts, and then he turns back into the turns back into the weird Lane Kiffin that wants to make the cryptic tweets and everything else. Right? It's wild.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy. I mean, but dude, I mean, what can you say? I mean, he's a great coach. He's gonna do great things there. I think it's so funny that the media is talking about this guy Jace Brown being number one after watching 15 minutes of routes on air. Him and Sark both come from Save, man. They both come from Save, and they're like, give this media, like, let them come to 2 practices, give them 10 minutes of practice, and the minute we go to anything where it's even where it's like wide receiver DB one-on-one, certainly team drills, get the media the hell out of here.
Yeah. The other note in this column on Kiffin that's notable to me is the fact that, like, it says here, 4 months in, people around LSU have been pleased with Kiffin. He's not coached a game, and LSU's not practiced in full pads yet, but he's quickly made himself visible by going to parades, sporting events, and showing appreciation for the area that can go a long way in building the trust around LSU. This donor thought Kelly, obviously Brian Kelly, never really embraced it. He says Kiffin, he's all in on the city and the state, and that surprised me a little bit, an LSU official said. He loves being in Louisiana, being in Baton Rouge, and being around people. To be successful head coach at LSU, you have to generally care about all 3 of those things. And everyone obviously criticized Brian Kelly for that because they said it made the staff and the players almost feel robotic while he was there. And that's something that, even though Kiffin doesn't spend a lot of extra time with players, it's the coaching style and the just way that the offices kind of carry themselves is kind of how it was explained, that he doesn't yell at nobody. He just lets players be themselves, and the way he runs practice is much different. And obviously it's a whole different regime. So everything I've read on LSU has been very positive from that perspective. Any thoughts on Kiffin? I got another note on recruiting, but
everybody has thoughts on Kiffin. I think he's going to do great.
Yeah.
What do you think, Maddie? You think Kiffin? I've talked to some people that aren't sold. Like, I'm sold. I think Alex seems like he's kind of sold.
I'm sold. I mean, he built such a good thing in Oxford, and he still said, "Deuces, I'm going to go to LSU." Brings in, a college quarterback that could be a guy that could be a top 10 pick next year if he kind of has that.
Dude, watch your Jordan Tyson. Go watch your Jordan Tyson film from when he was healthy last year, and tell me Sam Levitt can't spin it.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. And then you bring in Eugene Wilson, you bring in all these other guys. They're gonna be a good team.
So
they're gonna be a damn good football team.
They're spending north of $40 million on this roster. My last nugget before I send it back to Maddie is 2027 class already. The recruiting group, they got Peyton Houston, who's a great quarterback.
Oh, he's very good
in the 2027 class.
I saw him at the Elite 11. He little bit undersized, but very, very good.
So they the latest reports around LSU have kind of zeroed in on 2 prospects in this 2027 class, and it's kind of creating a big 3. There's also another quarterback in Louisiana, Elijah Haven, who's 6'5". He's kind of projected to Alabama right now. Massive human being, massive athlete, my number 1 ranked quarterback in the country. But they're kind of going full court press on Easton Royal and Ahmad Hudson, who Easton Royal is currently committed to Texas, 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. He's the prototypical new age alpha. He's a complete sicko. That's going to cost north of $2 million. And Ahmad Hudson, who's a tight end that we saw at the Navy All-American game as well, who's 6'7", wants to play basketball and football. And they're going full court press on both these guys. Royal was actually at LSU this week. He was quoted as to say, me and Coach Kiffin and Coach G-Mac, who's his position coach now, have a great relationship. They're texting me and calling me every night, he says, which is also kind of weird. Coach Kiffin's sending me videos every night and calling me from practice. We're building those relationships and getting a better idea of how they're going to use me in that offense. And he was wearing purple today. So for Texas folk out there, not a great comment, I would say, from the superstar.
It's always hard, man, whenever you land these guys early and you got to deal 10 the whole time. You got to hold others off the whole time. It's just like it's a little bit easier to be the one that's courting them than the one that's kind of trying to hold on to them and defend against the guys who are courting them.
I know these are 17-year-olds, Alex, but do you take anything out of that sentence there where he says building relationships and getting a better idea of how they're going to use me in the offense instead of how they would use me in the offense.
I don't know. Dude,
Is that reading in too much into it?
I think
Yeah,
so.
but because I mean but it could just be a nice little placement. Like maybe get an extra.
A
Maybe
lot,
a dog fight, dude.
a lot of kids will tell you like, no, they tell me how they would use me, how they would use me, how they would. But he says how they're gonna use me. I always
Well, that's just a Lane Kiffin, baby. He's a salesman through and through. He knows what to say.
He just does the deal where he turns it on for 5 minutes during practice. Maddie,
he's just lurking around.
Maddie, what do you got for us? And
all right,
and then we'll get out of here.
So I want to end the show with this because I've been watching. They're not a team that is technically the team I'm covering, but I've been watching a lot of Texas. At what point does this 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver all of a sudden get his name right up there with Jeremiah Smith? I'm talking about Cam Coleman. Because when I watch him, he has. I don't know if I'm watching a young AJ Green or Julio Jones, but I know I'm damn sure watching a really good football player. And at this point, with Arch Manning as his quarterback, are we looking at the wide receiver landscape and we're saying Jeremiah Smith? We know, we've seen, we've been bought in, but Cam Coleman's right there, and it's a 1-2 thing.
Matthews.
Yeah.
Golly.
Because this clip is, we see it. It seems like every other day in a different way. He just seems like he moves different, glides different, and he's 6'3", 200 pounds. Can he put on, the 5, 10, 15 pounds to be the Julio Jones alien type?
I've seen Cam up close. I don't want any. I kind of don't want anything to change with his body if I'm a Texas fan.
Yeah,
he's an alien as it is, dude. Like
he just moves different.
I kind of think, Jeremiah Smith is, 9 times out of 10 gets drafted before Cam Coleman does. But I think you're talking about a guy that gets drafted at 4 versus a guy that gets drafted at 11. If those guys, you know what I'm saying? If those guys live up to their preseason hype and have the kind of seasons that everybody is sort of pinning on them. But I think it's funny that you asked, because as somebody that primarily covers the Texas program, it's like Cam Coleman's all you hear about. It's all you hear about, especially right now with Arch Manning being limited in practice. Is like Cam Coleman, Colin Simmons. Those are the aliens. Those are the ones that people look at like, they just, they look at them like they just walked out of UFOs, and like that's how they look at practice. And so, to me, I wouldn't consider it. Maybe it's just because it's where I live in the world that I live in. We cover the whole SEC, but clearly, I live here in Central Texas. I went to Texas. I have to cover the Longhorns for a job. And for maybe it's just the echo chamber I'm in, but I certainly don't feel like anybody is sleeping on Cam Coleman. If that's the national narrative, then people probably need to wake up, because he's going to be a force to be reckoned with this season.
I think I'd probably say that there's not really a need. I don't think there's really, the problem is that this Jeremiah Smith thing is he's a freak of nature. He's an Adonis. He's 225 pounds, and it's different. I think it's just different. Like, I think you bring up, you invoke the AJ Green thing, and he's 6'3", he's 200 pounds, but I think you could also look at George Pickens, look at Marvin Harrison Jr., who 2 years ago was 6'3", 203 pounds, 204 pounds, and was the 4th overall pick in the draft. I don't think it's, will they be neck and neck in the NFL draft? Maybe. It could be one of those things where we saw, Drake London and Garrett Wilson and J-Mo go back to back to back. But it's clearly, I think, going to be these two guys in that class next year. And statistically, the problem is I don't think Cam Coleman will measure up, because we've already seen 2 years in a row now with 1,300, 1,400 yards from Jeremiah Smith. He probably wins the Blitnikoff next year with 16, 1,700.
Cody's already said that he's going to give Jeremiah Smith his vote, and he's already going to give him his vote just because he feels like he's earned it at this point.
Also, show note here, we have an announcement. Cody will be leaving us for Big Ten Weekly because apparently he's going to put all his eggs in the Jeremiah Smith basket.
Maddie, get it, Maddie, there he is, Cam Coleman, for the podcast audience. Get us out of here, brother.
All right. That's another episode. SEC Weekly. Again, there's football and then there's SEC football. We will see you next week. Peace.